Hi everyone, this is Ricky with Bromero Cards. Thank you for coming back and watching my newest video. Today I'm going to be working on a Galaxy Space card, and I'm going to be using a stamp from the Sweet Stamp Shop. It's the Gemini Constellation that I showed you guys last week that I got in my haul. And so now we're going to start going over some of the supplies we're going to use. We're going to use the stamp, of course. And then we're going to move over to the Canson watercolor paper. This is 4 3/4 by 5. And then we are going to use some black cardstock. It's 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. For the base, we're going to be using the Nina Solar White 110-pound card-based cardstock. Then we're going to be using some Inca Gold Silver. We're going to be using some Versamark for some heat embossing today as well. We're going to be using some Black Soot Distressed Ink for the Galaxy Sky. We're going to use a blending tool for that as well. We're also going to use silver embossing powder for the actual Constellation. Oh, and then a coffee filter that just flew right by on over here. We're going to use the Distress Sprayer, so we're going to use that to make some space look. Liquid glue to place the papers or to put the card together. Just some water for some watercoloring that we're going to do. I just have 3 here so that I don't mix a lot of colors together. We're going to be using some Brusho. This is fine pigmented powder. We're going to be using violet, ultramarine, and purple, and this is what we're going to be watercoloring with today. We're also going to use some Ken Oliver's liquid metal. We're going to use amethyst and sky. And then we're going to get the card started. So I'm going to pull out my watercolor palette, which is just a piece of white paper that I laminated. And we're going to put the actual powder onto the sheet here. And we're going to separate them a little bit because we don't want them touching. We don't want the colors mixing necessarily right now. And so I'm just going to add the powder. It just takes a little bit. You do not need to add a lot to get this color. So I'm going to wet the whole watercolor paper. Wet it generously, and then add some water to the powder. And then what I'm going to do is just put a bunch of spots around the paper. I spray it a little bit more because it dried out a little bit. But there's no system to this. You're just adding color to the cardstock. You're trying to make it so that there isn't a lot of white showing anymore. And so we're just adding the purple here and just filling in some of the spaces between the blue. We're going to take the darker purple, I believe that may be the ultramarine, and we're just going to fill in the gaps there. And we'll continue to fill that in. Again, there's no perfect way to do this. We're going to dry it a little bit, and then we're going to actually come back and add some more paint to this, because we want it to be brighter, because this eventually will have to show through some distressed ink, the Black Soot Distressed Ink. So what I'm doing is adding a little bit more color where all the blues were. Oh, and you probably hear my dog. Coming back in and adding some more blues. Then we're going to add some purple into the purple areas. You're just trying to make this look a little darker so it's not as light. And I'm going to continue to do that with all the colors. You'll see that the watercolors were actually dry on my sheet. It's because I had to leave for about 15 minutes and then come back. So we're going to dry that back up again. And then I come back in and add the amethyst and the sky ink. This is also ultra concentrated, so you don't need a lot. I didn't quite have enough of the amethyst, so I'd come back here in a few minutes and add some more. And this liquid metal, it's actually pretty shiny. There's like little pieces of glitter inside of it, and I'm not for sure if you can really see it in the video, but it adds some sparkle into the blue. And although we're not going to see a lot of it when we finish the card, it does shine through the distressed ink, and it just gives it a little bit more texture and a little bit more shininess to it. So now I'm going to go in with the amethyst, and you'll see that I didn't have enough, so we're going to put another drop there. We're going to put some more water in, and then we're just going to put that all over where the purple is. And again, we're trying to do is just make it darker in areas so that when we do go to do the distressed ink part, um, some of this color will actually show through, and that's part of the process of trying to make it look like a universe or a sky. So basically now what I'm doing is mixing all the purples and then just continually to add more purple onto the card until it's dark enough that I think it's okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue here in a moment. I'm going to start adding some blue. And it's okay for these colors to mix. They're not going to turn brown. You're going to be fine. Basically, we're just trying to cover the card with some color. And then what you're going to see me do is I'm going to dry it. I'm not going to show you that whole thing. We'll skip ahead here. And then I'm going to take some water, add it to the paint again. And then I'm going to take what I have and just dip it in the water, trying to give it a little bit more texture on the actual paper. And I don't like to waste either, so that's what that's for. So we dried this, and really what should have happened next is we should have done the distressed ink over it, but I did this first. I'm not for sure why. I had done 3 cards prior to this, and I did not do this. But I'm adding the Inca Gold. We're just going to add some water to it and liquefy it a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to splash it on the card. And it looked fine afterwards. It gave it a little bit more texture and shine to it. You'll see me here now. I'm going to tell you, no, don't do this here in a moment. But then all I'm going to do is after I realized I messed up, which you're really not messing up, you could actually do this step as well. I'm going to dry it off, and then we're going to start doing some of the distressing. Now, this is probably going to look really scary because you just spent all this time trying to make this piece of paper look gorgeous. But trust me, this is going to work out. I've done it so many times that it always comes out good. So we're just going to take the distressed ink and we'll tap it off onto the craft mat and then bring it onto the paper. And what we're trying to achieve here is darker on the outside and light on the inside. You still want to put some distressed ink over the middle of the paper because you want it to make it kind of look like a Milky Way kind of look. Just think about all the space pictures that you've seen of what clouds and stars look like. There's always that like burst of white, but then there's color all mixed in with it. So now we're going to take some water, we're going to spray it on here, and we'll let it sit. I think I let it sit for about 20 seconds. I'm going to tap this off, and then you're going to see, once I get it all tapped off, that there's actually some more white spots in there, kind of like raindrops. Then I'm going to go back in with this silver, add some more water because it had dried, and then we're just going to add more splashes to this. And actually, I really liked how this turned out, and this may be something I do in the future, is do the silver or gold, Inca Gold, on here before and after the distressed ink, because with the distressed ink, you really probably can't tell in the video, but it gives a little more, like, the stars seem further away, I guess I should say. So now what we're going to do is the stamping. You want to make sure this paper is completely dry before you do this. It has to be super dry. We're going to add the powder here to keep the anti-static, or to keep the static off the card. Then we're going to put it in the MISTI. I'm going to line it up with this graph paper. This helps me line up the actual stamp and the sentiment, or the word Gemini, with the dates. I actually looked up online to see how this should be formed on, like, how this should look on the card. And this is how the constellation would look if we were to look up into the sky. This is how the constellation would actually show. So I'm just going to add that to the top part of my card, and then we're going to add the Gemini and the date to the bottom. Once I get this lined up, I'm going to put the lid on the MISTI. Then I'm going to lift it up and take off that grid paper, because I no longer need that, and it keeps me from stamping the actual card. So I'm going to get everything situated, make sure everything's straight, and then I'm going to take the Versamark, and I'm actually going to ink this up 3 times and stamp it 3 times. Watercolor paper doesn't take ink that well the first or second time, so I just want to make sure that the embossing powder is going to stick to this when I go to put it on. So this is my third time, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera so that you can see the actual ink, so that you can see the areas that I need are wet. So now I'm going to get my silver embossing powder out. I'm going to cover this up, make sure that everything's okay, tap off the extras. You're going to see me get a brush. I'm going to take off a little bit on the bottom there. I could have left it there because people would have thought it was part of the galaxy sky. We're going to heat emboss this, make sure your gun's really hot. And then we're going to start putting the card together. I wiped it down a little bit with a slightly damp paper towel so that I could take the dust off. We're going to use some liquid glue here, and we're going to add this background here. And good thing I was using liquid glue because I didn't have it directly even. Because watercolor paper warps when you're using it, I'm going to apply this 3M foam tape on all sides directly to the edge, and then also in the middle. And with this card, you'll want to remove the paper from the middle section as well. So now I'm going to add this onto the card, and we're actually finished with it. We're going to hold it up, and then I'm going to show you the 3 other cards that I made as well. Gemini is part of the air sign, so I decided to use purples and blues for air. Taurus is an earth sign, so I used tans, greens, and blue, yellows for that card. Leo is a fire sign, so I used reds and pinks and yellows for that card. And then I used Pisces, which is a water sign, and I used blues, yellows, and greens for that. So these are the 4 cards that I made practicing with the galaxy sky. This is super easy. You could do it. I hope to see some of your creations. I want to thank you for subscribing to my channel, and I hope you have a great week. I'll be back soon with another card. Click on the cards below so that you can see other videos. Thank you.